Hello, and welcome to this next episode of Courageous Leaders, Connected Teams. I'm your host, Stephanie Freeth, and I am so excited to have Mark Gerow with us here today. Mark is an amazing person who has studied a lot of trauma-informed practices and modalities to help with nervous system regulation. And so I want to welcome Mark. Mark, good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invite, Stephanie. I appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, so let's let everybody know how we met. I was at Miraval. It's a resort and spa in the Berkshires. It's my happy place. I love going to Miraval. And Mark was there offering a session called TRE, which stands for Trauma or Tension Release Exercise. And my friend had told me about it. She's like, you got to go do this thing. This is amazing. And I didn't really know what I was getting into. And I went to Mark's session and it was transformative. And I'm going to let Mark describe what TRE is. And I've worked with Mark, one-on-one since our session. We've done some breathwork sessions. So every time I go to Miraval, I go to see Mark. And I'm amazed by his vast knowledge, both from a lived experience, but also all the modalities that Mark has pursued and has this deep knowledge for. So I'm really excited to have Mark tell us about how really applying this to leadership. How can leaders learn techniques and tools to regulate their nervous system, and how important that is, and also how accessible it can be. That's really what I want to share and spotlight with Mark today.
Well, let's start with Miraval. I was kind of recruited there as a specialist. And the wonderful thing about being a specialist at Miraval is you bring your specialty. And what is that for me? Basically, the tools that I've been using in my own life as someone who has experienced some early childhood trauma. I was in the military for 12 years. I started using certain tools and techniques as a 10-year-old, like drinking and drugging, to try to help myself sleep and lower anxiety. And, the crazy thing is it worked and it helped me survive those early years. And then at some point I got sober about almost 15 years ago. And from there, I realized I'm harboring a lot inside, compartmentalizing. And I think as an adjunct to some of the talk therapy I'm doing, I think I need to do some somatic work, need to work with what we call the issues in our tissues, right? And working with triggers, emotions, learning to lean in, learning to do hard things like sit with emotions. And I came across TRE. It was a lifesaver for me because I had tried to work with my own physical pain for many, many years, doing very common modalities like getting a massage, acupuncture, Reiki, chiropractic, physical therapy. And all these modalities, it resulted in temporary relief, right? So let's be honest, when you get a massage, how long does it take before you're tight again? If you're lucky, maybe a day or two. Some people even say 20 minutes. When I leave the office and get in my car, I'm tight again. So it was temporary, and I was really in a very desperate place. And one of my colleagues actually in a rehab that I worked at, had asked me if he tried TRE. It's the one thing I hadn't heard of, yet the work has reached over 7 million people in 90 different countries. I had not heard of TRE. I know, right? And so I found a provider, and my first session, I thought, this is amazing, like what my body is doing. And there's hope for me yet. I feel like my body is processing something and releasing. But after my third session, I woke up the next morning and my 12-year back pain was gone. And it never returned, more importantly, never returned. So what this is, it was created by a doctor named David Berceli. And he has a doctorate in clinical social work, master's in theology, Arabic. He's a bioenergetic therapist. He's a massage therapist. He knows the body well. And his work led him to war zones. And from there, he started to notice some interesting things. Every time a bomb would go off, he gives the example of being in the basement of a building in Lebanon where there were children and adults. And every time a bomb would go off and the building would shudder, everyone's body would contract and protect. And he started to theorize, well, if there's a genetically encoded mechanism that protects the body, just like someone sitting at a desk for 12 hours a day, highly contracted, rounded, hunched over, that's what happens naturally. Then there must be this genetically encoded mechanism to unwind the body, to move the body from a fight-flight state into the parasympathetic of rest, digest, recover, back to social interaction and cues. So, and there is, and it's called neurogenic tremoring. So that's what TRE is. It's inducing, after 7 exercises to prepare the body, inducing this neurogenic tremoring. And, at first it seems crazy. It seems weird. It's like, what is my body doing? I'm not good at letting go. I need to control this, that kind of thing. This is what we work with. So we really emphasize holding space, creating ways to self-regulate, to rest, to, stop doing what we're doing in order to feel safe. And if your animal body, your reptilian brain and your animal body feels safe, guess what? Processing of information can happen, and de-stressing, releasing, and letting go. So for me, it was a lifesaver. 12 years of back pain, gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's fascinating to hear where that came from. And I'll describe my experience of trying TRE. It's kind of like a normal exercise class. You're fatiguing the muscles in the lower body with wall sits and different ways of getting those legs. Because my understanding is that our body holds a lot of tension in the psoas muscle and that lower, kind of the lower body. And then you had us lie on the ground with our knees apart, and then the tremoring started. But the way you walked us into it, it was like my whole upper body was calm, and there's all this, shaking going on. And I'm like, I'm not doing this movement. My body is bringing forth this movement. And I'm a dancer, so I'm used to telling my body what to do. I'm used to, conducting movement, and this, to experience the tremoring and for you to hold that container of like, this is safe. This is the body's intelligence. This is letting off, what it needs to process. It wasn't a mental thing whatsoever. It was the body's own intelligence releasing. And I got to say, after that, it took some getting used to. I'm going to be present while this happens and just let it flow. I mean, that was probably 30, 45 minutes. And then it did kind of come to a stop. And after I left Miraval, usually I'm kind of jumpy in the front seat of a car when my husband's driving. And it was like my whole nervous system has just it was just like this. It had come down, like the reactivity of my nervous system. I could just feel it had come down a level. It's hard to describe what that was like. And now I know how to do that for myself. I when the shaking starts, I just know how to let it run through my body. And it's such a gift and a skill. And I just want more people to know about it because it's so powerful.
Yeah, it is a gift. It really is a gift from David Berceli. And I just want to touch upon a couple of the points that you mentioned. So, yes, we're working with the psoas. The psoas, it attaches to the head of your femur bone. It goes through the pelvic bowl. It connects to the lumbar region, and it's up against your diaphragm muscle. Now, this is your center, so we tend to, when we repress things and hold things in, it can feel very tight in the psoas, difficult place to reach, even with a massage. And then when we do some activation, so the preparation is the exercise, is doing some mild fatiguing and some stretching. That only lasts for, a few minutes. And then we lie down and we do an activation phase of it. And we don't tremor any more than 20 minutes with like a minimum of 10. So 10 to 20 minutes is the optimal window of tremoring. And so once we get in, then we observe. I connect with people, talk to them about, what you're noticing. Do you feel safe? If we don't feel safe, if we feel like we feel weird, we feel like, I don't know what's going on, well, let's rest. Let's straighten the legs on the ground. and let's rest. Let's allow the nervous system to settle, to downshift. And when you feel safe again, when you feel open, then let's reactivate. And these tremors, just to be clear, sometimes, yes, what you experience is very, very common, where just down from the diaphragm, lower down to the legs, you feel tremoring. The upper body can feel so relaxed and chill. The mind starts to go blank. And sometimes, though, the tremors do go up. They do go up the spine into the cranium, shoulders, fingers flicker, chin, eyelids. So it really is quite unusual. But once you take some deep breaths, settle in, and like you said, I'm just going to surrender to this and let my animal body kind of show me what it can do, trust the process. And for a lot of the modalities that I do, like cold plunging, holotropic breathing, that requires a certain amount of trust about what this process is. And so that's why we often encourage people to work with a provider, 3, 4, 5 times. So you start to feel safe. You get to know the exercises, you get to know the activation, how my body processes things from day to day, and then the integration and aftercare is important. And then you can do it again. A couple times a week is sufficient. No more than that normally, 2 to 3 times a week. So yeah, it's great to be supervised, get to know the work, and then yes, you can start doing it on your own for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for those specifics. And I imagine, having worked with so many people coming through Miraval, I'm just curious kind of what you see in terms of people. I talk a lot about whole body leadership, meaning we're leading from our head and our heart and our gut, and noticing body sensations as wisdom is really part of the practice that I talk about. So what do you notice as people, are having emotions run through them? And I'm just curious, things that you've heard through the years, and I don't want to have any confidentiality, not maintained, but just trends that you see as people have this experience. What's that like?
Some of the trends that I see are that there's always a percentage in the room of people that are skeptical that their bodies will shake and tremor, that there's no way I'm shaking and tremoring today. And, I've worked with some pretty highly intense people, type A folks, and everyone tremors. So once we get in, as long as I could rest at any time, I can self-regulate at any time. And people start to say, okay, well, let me give this a try, using the breath. But at first, yeah, there's a battle going on between the ego and the body and trying to control the experience. Because think about it. Like when I was a child going through some of my early childhood trauma, which it varied in different stages of my childhood and what the trauma was. So it was complex. And the one thing that I knew as a child that I needed to try to create, even if it was an illusion, was the idea of safety. So if I can feel like I'm in a safe environment, and that's part of my job in a group setting, is to make people feel safe and to hold space and to give them options and choices. And as you do feel you have these options to rest at any time and self-regulate, then you start to trust the process, and then the work begins. So like any animal, even in the wild, must feel safe first. So when we talk about this, it can set people off a little bit, and say, oh, this doesn't sound great, that I'm going to be shaking and tremoring for 15 minutes or something. But we lay it out on the table. We talk about it. And think about it. For me, one of the things that I think I know from the addiction recovery field is that most of us, we just want relief. We want to feel good. So we will utilize anything like having some sugar or shopping or, scrolling. We think, doom scrolling. We think we're going to feel better. And we want that dopamine release. So for me, one of the practices in my kind of daily dose methodology that I came up with is I don't want to stress my nervous system out. I don't want to take on too much, which is very common in the workplace, taking on too much. And I don't want to do that in my practices as well. Like, I don't need to practice yoga for 90 minutes and then do a 8-minute cold plunge and go for an hour hike. I could do a 5-minute meditation. I could do 2 minutes of Qigong. I can do a 90-second cold shower, and that's fine. It's enough. It's enough to create a shift. And so what I'm training myself to do now is to lean into those difficult feelings, like taking a cold shower or sitting in a yoga pose. I might do 2 poses on each side. And can I stay in this pose for a couple of minutes? Like, let's say a chair pose. And so I'm in that chair pose for 2 minutes. Do I know how to regulate? Do I know how to come out of the pose just enough to stay at my edge? And at that edge, there is feeling and sensation and information coming through. And as long as I'm not pushing myself past my own designated threshold, then good things begin to process and integrate and release from the body. And so that's the way it is for TRE as well. It's like, feel safe, know that you can come in and out of this, and let's see what the body is going to process today.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. It totally. And I think for our listeners, just having the sense of the range of possibilities of what they can practice. Because I imagine, if somebody's going to give a presentation or they're nervous before a big meeting, do you have favorite practices in this daily dose? What do you recommend that people can bring into their day when they've got a lot going on?
Yeah, some people know tapping, EFT tapping, that's good. I don't do a lot of that anymore, but I used to tap. I do a lot of breath work now. I will do some Qigong, like a little bit where I stand and do a little bit of bouncing on the floor to move my energy and ground myself. So I'm tapping my heels and do what's called shaking the pillar. And I do some tapping. I let my whole body bounce and shake. But breath work is one of the most probably accessible things you can do. You carry it around with you all day. So let's say I know, like today, I knew I was coming on to this podcast, and there was some wonderful kind of anxious nerves. It isn't the anxiety where you feel dread. It was the anxiety of excitement that I was coming, but I don't want it to overwhelm me. I don't want to get a dry mouth. I don't want any of that, right? So I sat here before I actually the start button and came to you. I did some box breathing. And box breathing I learned in the military. And so let's back up a little bit. Animals in the wild, they don't change the way they're breathing. Their breathing changes because of their environment. So if I feel nervous, if I feel a little anxious, I might start to notice within myself, I'm sweating a little bit. I can feel my heart beating a little more rapidly, or I feel that kind of like that elephant on my chest, or I begin to ruminate a bit too much. So I go, things are building, things are shifting. What can I do? So box breathing is used when I was in the military, and it's used now in the category of just prior to a stressful event. That's when we do box breathing. Just prior to going online, giving that talk, talking to a family member about a difficult subject, talking to a lawyer or a doctor, whatever it is. But, like you or like these leaders, maybe they're leading a meeting or going into a kind of a highly stressful event. So then you can put your feet flat on the floor and you exhale first. And then just like a box that has even lines, square box, you inhale for about 4 seconds. Then you hold your breath for 4. You exhale for 4. And then you hold again for 4. So the inhale and the exhale are even, and they're not deep and they're not long. So they're just balanced and even. They're not going to send you into too much of an inhale, stimulus, heart rate going up, too much of an exhale, getting too sleepy. We want just even breath. And then there's this holding pattern. So animals hold their breath. Let's say a deer is eating wildflowers in a meadow, and it senses a mountain lion over there. It will hold its breath, tense the muscles, assess the danger. Oh, that's not a mountain lion. That was just a limb falling from the tree, right? So then it goes back into that parasympathetic response. So animals will hold their breath when they're assessing a stressor, danger. So we are animals too. We are primates. We're mammals. We've got that reptilian brain we talk about. So if I'm going to hold my breath in a breath practice, it's most likely about assessing something. And so in terms of going into a meeting, I can remind myself, this isn't the end of the world. This isn't the end all be all. I just have to say what I know. I'm going into the meeting in a very centered and balanced way. So I'll do, in any of the breaths I might talk about today, usually I advise 6 to 8 rounds, which is not all that long, but it gives a chance for the chemistry, maybe a little bit of adrenaline or cortisol that's been released into the bloodstream, neurotransmitters, to dissolve. And we need about 90 seconds. And that's the same for when I'm doing cold plunges too. I step in, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. So that I get into the tub, or into the shower, up to my shoulders, maybe my face, in the shower. And I catch my breath. And I just need to be there for about 90 seconds. This is the time limit of adaptability. This is when I start noticing chemistry is changing, my blood pressure, things are dissolving in my bloodstream, and I feel in control again in 90 seconds. And that's really for any big emotion. If I'm angry, and let's say anger, another big emotion. If I'm angry, I don't want that to hijack me, to overtake me, to debilitate me in some way. I don't want to go into the red zone. So I might acknowledge my anger or my feeling and then do something like breath work. And now I can kind of moderately experience it, harness something else and communicate about my anger, or in terms of going on the podcast this morning, doing the box breathing 6 to 8 rounds, and then something shifted and I realized this is exciting, but not so much that I'm feeling like I'm not going to be able to speak, So I regulated myself just 6 or 8 rounds.
Yeah.
So do you want to do some box breathing?
Sure. Just to give people an experience of that. It's such a great tool to have in your tool belt.
So your feet are flat on the ground and your spine is long. And you feel you have a little space in your diaphragm to breathe. And so we'll just exhale first. Just let the breath out. And then follow me breathing through your nose. Inhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it's as simple as that. You do that 6 or 8 rounds, and you'll feel a shift. Something has shifted. It doesn't mean that everything's going to go away. The anxiety that I felt is not going to necessarily go away. It's just manageable. I'm now in a place that I feel centered and grounded. And this is also true for another breath that I teach people called coherent breathing. It's a breath that was studied by the Institute of Heart Math. And they studied this breath. It's basically 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. And I use a track called 2 bells, that the bells are timed exactly for coherent breathing if I don't like counting. And what this amounts to is that you're breathing 6 breaths per minute. Now, the average human being is told by nurses and doctors that you should be breathing 16 to 20 breaths per minute. To me, that seems very fast, but it's normal. For most people, that is normal. And some people even breathe much faster than that, so 16 to 20 might be an improvement. But for this, it's 6 breaths per minute. And what the Institute of Heart Math noticed was that when you are in there a few minutes, 6 breaths per minute, 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out, your brain waves, your heart rate, and your emotional state all come into an optimal state we call coherent. Engineers use the word coherence when they've made a machine that's in its optimal state of maneuvering, right? Of processing. And so we want our physiology to also be in an optimal state. So I think we have a track here. There's our producer in the background, your producer. And so we can play just 30 seconds of that just to show you the sound, possibly. That higher belly you just heard, I use for the inhale. The lower one for the exhale. Feel free to breathe in through your nose and even out through pursed lips if it helps. Here comes the inhale. And the exhale. And so it's 2 bells. 5 seconds in. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And it's recommended that you do this 5 minutes in the morning, maybe midday, get out of your chair, go someplace else, put on your pods, sit and practice for 5 minutes, some coherent breathing, and then maybe again 5 minutes before bedtime.
It's so simple, and yet I could feel in my physiology. There again, it's just a settling. I'm getting in contact with the now moment. I'm present. I'm available. I'm here. That's what's really both simple and profound.
And it's a manipulating of your breathing pattern to change the messaging to the brain. Maybe before you were feeling off center, a little out of whack. And what we're sending the message may be that I feel balanced. I feel here, centered, and nothing is pushing or pulling at me right now. And I feel that just after a couple of minutes. Sometimes I'll be working with a client on their trauma, and sometimes with TRE, we don't tell our stories because the body knows the story, right? It knows everything. But sometimes I'll work in other ways and someone will be telling me a story and it'll trigger something within me, an old experience, a memory, and an emotional response. And sometimes I have this tendency to dissociate. I've been using that tool since I was a child, right? To just disappear from my body as a way to feel safe. And it'll happen in the middle of a session. And when I notice that I'm doing that, the client doesn't know it, but I have come back to coherent breathing. And I know what it feels like 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. I don't even have to count anymore. I don't have to hear the bells. I just know how it feels. And I'll get into this. And it's a little difficult at first, as you'll find if you practice, to get that breathing kind of open. And it's like the Tin Man. You have to apply some of the lubricant in there and get that diaphragm moving. But then within 30 seconds of doing that, I'm back. Centered, as you said, centered, I'm grounded, I'm here, I'm present again.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. And I want to take a slightly different turn. I work with the Enneagram, and I know that you were talking about, hey, I felt a little nervous before coming on the podcast, and you had shared with me that you identify with Enneagram Type 5, which is the quiet specialist. And oftentimes when I'm working with 5s, they want that deep knowledge, but they also can get overwhelmed by other people's emotions. And so they can guard their time, their resources, and they also, that stimulation that's coming at them, they can feel like, too much. So I can imagine as a 5, these tools have been really helpful. I'm also just curious to hear how being an Enneagram Type 5 shows up for you in your day-to-day work and practices.
Yeah, I always think of the totem animal of a 5 as an owl. right? And I remember as a child sitting in the back of the classroom, not because I didn't want to learn, I really wanted to learn, but I needed to be back there, not front and center, not being watched, not being called upon, but I just want to take in the information. And then when I left the military, I realized some of the trauma there had made me even more vigilant and even more of a processor of information. So facial expressions, information, and just you saying to me today, we have a parameter that we're going to try not to go over. We're going to do it for X amount of time. That was helpful for me to know that we're not going to go over this amount of time. We have a boundary, and I feel safe now. So thank you for that. And so that helps me a lot. And I'm also what you might consider an introvert. And I'm really comfortable with like speaking to other people in public and leading a workshop, but I need to recharge. So I need to guard my resources. I need to have my time alone. And so after this, I'm just going to go, get some tea, sit still for a bit, maybe go out into nature and sit in my backyard and just regroup, resettle, recenter after giving a lot of energy right now. So these tools, yes, have been very, very helpful because as you might know from a 5, we're very mental, very heady. I do research. I'm watching podcasts all the time. I'm reading articles. I'm reading books. I've got 17 books on my bookcase next to my bed, that's half read because my mind just goes from here to this resource. And I love it. Some people like, Mark, how can you do that? Not finish a book from the beginning to the end. That's just the way I am. I'm a researcher. I love having all kinds of information coming at me. But there is a time when I have to remind myself as a 5, Mark, you've had 3 cups of coffee. You have not stopped. You forgot to eat. And I need you to eat. I need you to get grounded, do a little bit of meditation. And when I say meditation, I mean 5 minutes.
Right.
That's it. And it might be coherent breathing. It might be another meditation, but that's what I need to do to create balance because I can go the whole day without eating.
Wow.
But good for me because I'm just in my head practicing information. And it's helpful for the things that I need to do in life, but I need to really watch and balance myself, knowing my own tendencies.
Right. So I got to follow up on that, knowing also that you love all these different books and resources. What are your favorite books or authors that you want to recommend to this group of leaders who want to learn about their nervous system, who want to learn about how to lead from their whole body self? I know you and I had talked about Body Keeps a Score by Bessel van der Kolk has been really influential. I know Peter Levine's work has been influential in this whole field of somatics. Any others you want to really highlight that people should check out?
Yeah, let me go through a couple of them. So Gabor Mate, right? Gabor Mate, he has a number of books. One that's for addiction, one it's called In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. There's ones on trauma. He just came out with a new book, The Myth of. No, I'm gonna have to find it.
Yeah.
There are books. Yeah, Peter Levine, Waking the Tiger. The Body Keeps a Score. We mentioned. There are so many. We should have a list.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah,
we'll put Mark's favorites in the show notes.
There's a book that I want to mention that I've given to people, some of my clients that are in the corporate world that have many, many employees and have meetings and talk about things like emotions, actually, and practices. And that was one of the reasons why I met this gentleman and we did breathwork, meditation, and we did a number of things. And I gave him a book called The Object is the Way. And it's by Ryan Holiday. And it's about stoicism. It's about this idea that can we understand what's out of my control, which is most everything, and then understand what's in my control. With any luck at all, it'll be how you're processing the information that's coming at you, the experiences in life. How am I processing that? How am I maneuvering through life? I don't think a good intention is to look for a life of no stress. because that's not realistic at all. There is stress every day. There's going to be problems and stressors and trauma. It's going to happen. The analogy is there's always going to be stormy seas. We're not going to find a lifestyle that there's no waves in the ocean. So it's better to build a sturdy ship, right? Meaning your container,
Right.
your body. And so The Object is the Way is a great book on, Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus and all these great Stoics that really talked about these practices of meditation, of observation, doing these tools in order to work with the storms that's there. I'm currently experiencing in my life right now a storm, and I'm trying on a day-to-day basis to allow myself to acknowledge what I'm experiencing, to know that because of what I'm experiencing right now, I have a very busy day. There is a chance that I'm going to be impatient with some of the clients, some of the people that I'm going to run into. There's a good chance I might be a little heightened in my emotion, a little less patient. And so knowing that, I can work with today. I know that I've got X, Y, and Z on my calendar. I've got these sessions, these classes, these workshops. And if I know that, I'm already at a heightened level, well, I'm going to need throughout the day to really check in, do some of my own practices, and know when I'm interacting with someone, the possibility is that I'm either not listening or I could be a little impatient. And that's just what happened to me yesterday. In my office, in between my classes and my private work, I'll do some practices. Just, it could be just 2 minutes. And that's been very helpful to me, is know what you're working with. The intention is not to have no storms, no choppy seas, but I'm continuing to build this sturdy ship that's going to be able to navigate through these storms from day to day. And I'll really appreciate and be grateful for the calm, the beautiful sunset and the calm seas when it happened. But I'm not expecting it every single day because I'm a practitioner. That's an unrealistic goal.
Right. And then building that boat through your body, through these practices like TRE and breathwork, you're making sure your container is strong. And that when you meet other people, that in relationship with them, and we dance together with each other's nervous systems. And so that awareness of your own self-regulatory practices, coming in contact with people doing this work, it's beautiful. It's not perfect. And yet it is the dance of life that we're here to do. So I love your examples of how you've navigated.
I loved how you just put that as a dancer yourself and really working intertwined with other people's nervous systems. That's exactly right. Is that you have no idea what this person is working with, how they're living in their bodies and their nervous system. So if I can create a little more bandwidth in my own mind and body, then I can be a receiver of that information instead of coming into, which we all do, right? We come into a meeting, we come into a session, and we're already up to here choking on our stress. And we have no bandwidth. Our muscles are tight. And it's just probably not going to go as well as you'd like.
Yeah, that awareness, I often say the inner game runs the outer game. So the more we can be in touch with that inner game, we can work with it through physical practices, through emotional practices. It just elevates our capacity to stay regulated, or if we're dysregulated, know how to work with that. Know that, hey, the storm is happening. I'm not going to make myself bad for being dysregulated. My body is wise, trusting the body and being able to draw from it, I think is so important.
Well, self-compassion, right? Because we know we're going to be dysregulated. We know we're going to say sometime that we regret, should have kept my mouth closed. But we need to be more compassionate and to ourselves, because we are these beings, these animals that have been through things, and they will show up. And so, have you heard of the book? It's an Inside Job.
I don't think I've heard of that one, no.
It's a meditation book. It's about meditation. But what you were just saying, like, it is an inside job. We need to really tune in what's going on in my inner landscape today.
I always ask all of my guests, what does courageous leadership mean to you? Or what is courage in your life? And so I'm just curious.
Well, for me, I mean, this is just purely from my perspective, my point of view, which is the only one I have. And that is being courageous is, let's say, even in the 12-step program that I participated in, there was just anonymity, right? You don't want to share that someone else is in the program, they need to share that themselves. But when I was in the 12-step program, I found that there was not a lot of sharing outside of the meeting. It wasn't this idea that I can talk to my friends, family, that I'm struggling, that I'm in recovery, that I'm in active recovery. And so for me, I think part of being courageous is being slightly vulnerable, knowing that we're all human and we have our weaknesses, we have our challenges. And if I can tell a little bit of my story in a way that helps someone else open up or realize that I'm human too and I'm working with my issues, then I find there's a strength that comes through and there's a deeper connection that happens between people in their nervous systems when you know, like, hey, this person is being very vulnerable and open right now about their challenges. And then that's where I'm coming from with these teachings, with my own lessons that I've learned in my life. I've been very challenged, and I chose, for one, because I had 2 boys, I had dad and other men in my family, alcoholics. I've chosen to break the cycle. And in doing so, talking to other men and other people about my own challenges. And one of them, just for instance, and maybe a little TMI, but I experienced sexual abuse as a child. And when I started at least sharing a little bit of that in the rehab that I worked at, other men would come forth and say, oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. I too have experienced something similar to that. And I've never told anyone. I'd never worked with it before. And it's affecting my relationships. It's affecting my sleep, my health. And so that repression of emotion and those experiences is what some of the trauma-informed work that I do kind of addresses without having to necessarily share the stories. So I think courage is partly about that for me, is being vulnerable, opening up.
Thank you for your willingness to share that. I'm sorry that you had to go through that. And I marvel at how you are, as you said, choosing to use that experience as a way to connect with people. You could choose to have it make you bitter, which I'm sure there have been episodes of that. And yet at this stage, you're choosing to connect. And that vulnerability is your doorway. And I do think it's kind of that contagious in a good way. As you said, you share that with someone, you're vulnerable. They're like, hey, I've never shared this with anyone. And you start to create that compassionate, those connections. And often I do find that vulnerability, the thing that we're most scared of to say because it feels scary, it's what connects us with other human beings.
Right. And I think that's, not to get into politics or anything, but that's, I think, part of the issue is, are we talking to everyone? Are we talking to your neighbor and folks that you might not talk to? And I see people all the time that I might not, meeting them on the street, share what I'm sharing or listen to their story. But I'm glad that I run into people of all, walks of life and hear their stories. And what you realize is that we're all the same. We're all the same.
And we're all walking around with wounds that have come through our lived experience. And I recently wrote a couple things on LinkedIn about when we make decisions from our wounds that haven't been healed, they come out as judgment, blame, criticism, projection, all these things that we're seen as very reactive in our culture. And I fundamentally believe that it's in turning towards our own wounds rather than running away from them that we heal ourselves, and oftentimes we have support to do that. We have people guiding us through these types of exercises.
Right.
Like, that's how we change our world, by attending to the wounds that we're carrying, so that then we don't show up from that wounded place and start, having those wounds get sprayed onto other people. I really feel like what's happening right now is a call for care and compassion towards our wounds, and being with others to know that they've been wounded too, in any number of ways.
And think about that I think we know that intuitively, that we can turn towards those things and lean into the hard places, but doing it is a whole other story. And so we need a support system, as you said, of teachers and providers and people that have gone through this type of exploration and investigation, excavating inside. And so sometimes I write as well as you. I like writing because I can excavate, and I can start with just putting my shovel in the soil there and then start to dig a hole. And then ultimately that leads to a tunnel over here to a whole other set of things. And so I can just let myself work through these sensations and feelings breath by breath. And so I do writing and breathing and meditating and then writing. And sometimes, like, I have on my phone and on my watch, I have a little app that it's just, I speak into and record, and then it sends to my email, and it's an AI app that gathers all of what I've said, formalizes it, and gives it a title, and then it's in a file. It's called Speak something, Speak Easy or Speak. But it's a great app. But anyway, so I'll get an idea, and it'll usually be like I'll be listening to music in the car, or I'm listening to a podcast where someone is talking about that excavation process and those emotions and trauma or whatever it might be. And then something comes up, full feeling comes up in me, and then I just hit the app, I'll talk about it, then I'll write about it and go a little bit deeper. And so for us, we may need help with guidance, with prompts, with meditations. And so, I've made a few recordings on the Insight Timer app just to help people through some of that, or, guiding someone in TRE or holotropic breathing or cold plunging, that kind of thing, where we need support, especially at
Absolutely.
first. As we get better, we can start to support ourselves as we build our container.
So I got to tell a story myself, since you brought up holotropic breathing. So I did a session with Mark, and I mentioned I'm a dancer earlier. And so sometimes when I do these types of sessions, I don't have words come through. It comes through my body. It comes through as movement. And I remember, and I was like moving around, and I remember you saying later, like, that was like the craziest session. I wanted to keep you safe, and here you are moving. And like,
okay, there's other people in the room, right? And like, this Stephanie.
It happened to be my husband at the time, so that was good. But
Yeah, right.
Still my husband, but
That's just great that you allowed yourself to actually move around and allow the energy to be expressed that way. And that's where, when we do holotropic breathing, which, by the way, used to be used with LSD, takes you into an altered state, you go into the subconscious. And a lot of times people will experience things physically, emotionally, they get downloads of information, they release things. And so a lot of times my instruction is let out primal sounds and move your body, because you don't move right animals anymore. We don't let out, primal sounds. So it can be very challenging. And even though I remind people 2 or 3 times to do this, ultimately you get someone doing the breathing, they have the eye mask on, the headset, and no one is moving. No one's letting out a sound at all. And then stuff starts happening where the body starts getting tense, and I've got to go over to them and, and guide them and say, okay, it's time for movement and sound. Let's do it. And ultimately, bam, energy starts shifting right at that point. It's amazing.
Yeah. Movement and sound are so crucial for emotional healing, and having people who can walk you through that experience, it matters. And I think these effects are cumulative, whether we're doing a daily dose practice, whether we did a TRE session, being able to do these things, it really, to me, is a long-term caretaking of our nervous system, so that when I'm in that storm, I'm not getting as dysregulated as I used to. I have the capacity to hold more. And if I am getting dysregulated, I know how to kind of come out of it. So I'm just so grateful to you for what you've brought to me, what you bring to others. And I want to make sure people can find you. So if people want to learn more about your work, where should they come find you?
Yeah, the website is The Daily Dose Wellness. And I've got another one that's attached, My Daily Dose Practices, which is going to be eventually a YouTube channel with a lot of these practices and little bites. And I was going to say, there's a book called Tiny Habits and Atomic Habits. And that's kind of the premise around this. But it happened to me naturally during a state when I was in a very deep, dark place where I realized I can't do anything. I could just, maybe hold a chair pose for 15 seconds. And then I broke down and was crying. And I realized I'm in a very sensitive place. I could only do small doses of things so I'm not overwhelmed. And then it dawned on me, hey, this is kind of the way I can work in life. So The Daily Dose Wellness, or My Daily Dose Practices. And I'm on the Insight Timer. I have a few meditations. One Yoga Nidra is going to be dropped soon, which is called non-sleep deep rest. Non-sleep deep rest is the new term that people have for Yoga Nidra now. Andrew Huberman of the Huberman Lab came up with that term, I think. So that's going to be something that there's a science behind it, and where you're still awake and aware consciously, but your body goes into a deep state of rest and relaxation, very regenerative. So that's the Insight Timer, the website. I do a lot of my work on Zoom, so feel free to reach out.
Yeah, I did a session with Mark, a couple sessions, I think, on Zoom after we had done TRE in person, and the Zoom session was really supportive as well. So for people who are not close to the Berkshires, I encourage you to reach out to Mark for support in that way. So is there anything you want to say to feel complete for today? I am so grateful to you. This has been enlightening. We're going to have to do another episode in the future because there's so much more we could keep going into. But anything you want to add to feel complete for today?
Yeah, you all have the ability to self-regulate, to send new messages to the brain and from the brain back to the body. Just having a couple of tools. Don't overwhelm yourself. Just have a couple of go-to, breath techniques, meditation, and apply them. And that's the thing. It takes about 90 days or more to create a new neural pathway. So we want that positive feedback loop of doing a 2-minute meditation. Oh, good. I did it again today. And then tomorrow I could do another 2 minutes. So we have this positive feedback loop that sends us back to our practice. And then from there, we start to build that neural pathway. So give it time, be patient, be compassionate, and just pick up a couple of new tools and you'll really benefit and find that your boat and your vehicle is getting stronger.
Thank you. That's a beautiful way to sum up. Thank you to our listeners. It's good to be with you. Would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. And until next time, stay courageous, stay connected.
Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate you.